Hey everybody, welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe, Mary Kay Cabot, Ashley Bastock. It is Thursday when we're recording this. It's about 4:25, 4:30 on Thursday. So we're going to look back a little bit at OTAs, talk about some things that are going on around the league, including some significant news in the AFC North that happened a little bit before we hit record. Kind of get into some of the other stuff. We've spent so much time on the quarterbacks. And rightfully so. That's the battle everyone's talking about. There was a lot that happened on Wednesday that I think is worth talking about as well. So let's just start here. We heard from Jim Schwartz, and he said that Myles Garrett, he thinks he's going to have his best year ever. And Mary Kay, he said he expects it. Like, that comes with the contract. I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said he's going to have his best year ever, and he should, because he just became the richest defensive player in the history of the NFL. So I guess my question here is, what does Myles Garrett's best year ever look like?
Wow, that's a tall order. And I thought that was very interesting from Jim Schwartz to put it out there like that, to set that bar or to sort of throw down the gauntlet and basically challenge Myles to have his best season ever. Very, very interesting. And he even quoted, I think, Spider-Man saying, "Too much has been given, much is required." So here he is basically saying, okay, you got what you wanted. You got your $40 million. Now we expect you to have your best season ever. Big words from Jim Schwartz. I think the best season ever for Myles Garrett would include, it's got to include now more turnovers, more forced fumbles, more big plays like that. So I think he has to dominate a little bit more strip sacks probably, and even more pressure than they've gotten in the past. I know they have to get it from other places, but I think they still need a little bit more from Myles too, because he's capable of it. He's definitely capable of it. And now he's got some other guys on that defensive line like Mason Graham that should be able to also bring the heat. And so I think that just a little bit more in every category is what they need from Myles.
I think that's the scary thing about Myles, Ashley. When we talk about him, he has been really good, and he's on a Hall of Fame trajectory. He'd probably be a Hall of Famer if he retired tomorrow. And yet there is still sort of this next level to Myles Garrett that he can unlock. And I think we've seen stretches where you watch a 3 or 4 game stretch and he just gets hot, and it's like, this guy's going to have 25 sacks this year. If he ever puts together just a 17 game stretch of just peak Myles Garrett, that's when you're talking like one of the greatest defensive seasons ever.
Yeah, and Myles hasn't done that yet, right? I mean, we talked about this a lot last year. There's always something, it seems, some form of adversity that Myles has to face, and those things look very different, right? In 2022, it was the car accident. This past year, it was not only their losing record, but him dealing with his feet. 2023, it was the shoulder. There was, of course, the suspension for Helmetgate. There was, of course, 2020 where he was impacted by COVID and his asthma and breathing issues were flaring up, right? So he has not been able to do that yet. And to add to what Mary Kay said, like, not only in terms of like what his best season ever could look like, I think it's that consistent production. It's creating the turnovers and game-changing plays. And then I always go back to the two things Jim Schwartz said all the way back in his introductory press conference when the Browns hired him. I think for Myles, he's always envisioned a 20 sack season and possibly the sack record for the NFL. So Myles is topped out at 16. I'm sure that 20 sack mark is something he would like to hit as well, but it requires, we've seen it, Dan, like you said, he does a good job of having those spurts where he gets hot, and those have been huge to his overall numbers, but we need to see more consistency from him. And look, it's funny saying that because he obviously, like you said, he's a future Hall of Famer already, but it just goes to show that there really is another level he can still hit here.
Yeah, this is going to sound weird because this is a guy that's won Defensive Player of the Year. But it does, like, when you look at the Pro Football Reference page, it still feels like that signature season is still sitting there for him to go get. You know what I mean? So like you look at, pick any random defensive player, right? Everybody talks about Myles versus TJ Watt, right? Like when you look at TJ Watt's Pro Football Reference page, there's that 2021 season where he had 22 and a half sacks, and set the sack record that year. And of course, fed a lot off getting to play the Browns and Baker Mayfield twice. You go to Von Miller's page, and you see an 18 and a half sack season, and a Super Bowl MVP, things like that. Myles Garrett has done incredible things, Mary Kay. The double-digit sacks every single year. The getting mentioned in the same breath as guys like Lawrence Taylor and other great pass rushers. But when you look at the Pro Football Reference page, it still feels like that signature season is sitting out there when we're going to look back at Myles' career and say, man, remember, in Jim Schwartz's mind, it's 2025. Man, remember 2025 when Myles came out and had 23 sacks and 4 forced fumbles and scored 3 touchdowns, whatever it is, just that signature year to go with what has been an impressive career so far.
Yeah, I think one thing that would have helped in this regard is if they would have had a bona fide other pass rusher opposite him. I think that really would have helped. Someone else over there who could consistently get those double-digit sacks and maybe take a little bit of that chipping away from him, a little bit of the double teaming away from him. So that's one thing that I think would have helped. But here's another thing that I keep wondering about, and I haven't gotten a chance to ask Jim Schwartz about it yet, or Jacques Césaire, the defensive line coach, about it yet. But what I do wonder now is, with the proliferation of the dual threat running quarterback in the NFL right now, these guys aren't just sitting ducks anymore in the pocket. I mean, you just can't get there and think that the quarterback was going to be where he was 2 seconds ago or a millisecond ago, because they're out of there. They're running. They're on the move. And I think things are just different. And I wonder if the days of 22 sacks are maybe behind us. I could be wrong about that, but I just have to wonder about that. So it'll be interesting to see how that works going forward. But for Myles, in a 17-game season, I don't think 14 is actually enough. I don't really think that's enough. Now, I know, once again, he is taking on the double team. He's taking on the triple team. But I think he's capable of more than that. I really do. I think that he should always be in sort of the 18 range, which would be a career high for him. But I definitely think that 1 a game isn't too much to ask with his bend, with his speed, and with all of the different things that he can do, including moving from place to place and taking on a better matchup than maybe the one he did on the down before. So I think more strip sacks are in order. I've always said, and I know everybody always says, oh, TJ plays a different position, and that's true. But I also think that a few more batted passes would be in order for him. And I've gotten pushback on that when I brought up that topic before. But I don't see why he can't do that. He's got an incredible vertical leap. And if you're not getting the sack, maybe sometimes you can get some more of those batted passes, because that's a big time negative play as well. Anytime you can get the negative plays, that's what you're looking for. So I think there is another gear to him. I think there's more than meets the eye. Of course, he's been amazing. It's been a Hall of Fame career. He's been Superman at times. But as several of his defensive line coaches have stated over the years, there is one more gear that he's got.
I think so. To your point about the other edge rusher, this is what's really interesting to me, and this is something that, you ask 20 people this question, you'll get different opinions from all of them. But I've always thought that Myles especially could benefit from better play on the interior than what he's had. I mean, he's had decent edge rushers on the other side. I mean, Jadeveon Clowney had a great year his first year here. Zadarius was pretty good his year and a half here. Not dominant guys necessarily, but I thought they were good. What Myles has never really had is dominant defensive tackle play. I mean, there just hasn't been a guy. They've tried to find it. They paid a bunch of money for Dalvin Tomlinson. He was fine as kind of a run stuffer, but never really created the pressure I think they wanted out of him. And they've tried to draft guys. It hasn't worked. There's potential here that, and it's putting a lot on these young guys early, but there is potential here, Ashley, that with Mike Hall and Mason Graham, you might have two pretty good disruptive defensive tackles. And I know you're writing about Mason Graham here today. Like, this might kind of be that defensive tackle presence, because I have heard, Chris Long is a guy that I've heard talk about it. He always preferred, give me a great defensive tackle. That's what I care about. The other side doesn't matter to me. Now, again, other guys are going to say differently. They want the other bookend, but having a defensive tackle presence might help Myles more. And maybe they found that in Graham and Mike Hall.
Yeah, I've even heard other Browns edge rushers talk about that. I know Obo Okoronkwo has been very vocal about that in recent years too, the value of having somebody on the inside who can create pressure. And look, I think if you think about the mechanics of teams doubling and chipping Myles and doing all those things, yes, if you have someone else dominant on the other side, that makes it, in theory, I guess, more difficult for a team to go, okay, which guy do we potentially want to chip here or whatever. But I think it actually makes it harder, just the mechanics of it, if you have a really good guy on the inside. And if you have two of them, it makes it that much harder, because who exactly are you going to be doubling Myles with now if you can't use one of your guard or whatever? And they really have to be worried about those D tackles. I think it makes one-on-one scenarios a lot more likely in that instance. And both of those guys, both Mike Hall and Mason Graham, if they can create pressure, I do think that's going to be really good for Myles. It's going to be really good for the other young edge rushers like Isaiah McGuire and Alex Wright that the Browns have right now. And it's going to allow them to get more free. But, we talked to Jim Schwartz about this yesterday. It's part of my story. This idea of, we know Mason Graham can get pressure, but he hasn't played in a system like this, which is kind of exciting, but it also means there's going to be some growing pains. It sounds like there have maybe already been some of those early growing pains, which is fine. This is the time of year you work those out. But this is really the way, they have not been able to figure out D tackle. For me, looking at this regime, it's D tackle and receiver. They've never quite been able to figure it out. I don't think they've gotten close. They've never been quite able to find long-term solutions. Maybe with receiver, it's Jerry Jeudy. Maybe that's the start of it, right? But D tackle, maybe Mason Graham and Mike Hall are going to be the start of it. And I'm really curious to see what those two guys look like together when Mike Hall is able to do team drills.
Yeah, and there's this element, Mary Kay, when you can create pressure up the middle, the quarterback's got nowhere to go. A lot of these guys, the pocket guys, like to step up and operate in the front of the pocket. Well, they can't do that. The scramblers, they got to bail a little bit earlier now, and it creates so much discomfort when that pass rush is coming right at them, and that could lead to 2, 3, 4 more sacks for Myles over the course of a season when a guy has Mason Graham bearing down on him, and all of a sudden he runs to one side and there's Myles Garrett just waiting for him. I think that would help Myles if these two guys, these two young pass rusher or two young interior guys, can develop into pressure creating defensive tackles to just make these quarterbacks go places where they don't want to go.
Right, and that is the plan. And we now know, and the Browns have thoroughly embraced this, is that defensive tackle is sort of an it position. It has become a premier position in the NFL. It's why the Browns targeted Mason Graham there at number 5 overall, which is so incredibly high. When they first showed up on the doorstep here, defensive tackle was somewhat of an afterthought, and they have really evolved in the past 5 years to the point now where they really believe that it is almost as important as an edge rusher, and maybe in some cases even more important than an edge rusher. So they have really, really high hopes, and if it works out like that in reality, the way that they hope it does in theory, quarterbacks are going to have a hard time operating this year, opposing quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers could have a hard time functioning against this defensive front. That's the plan. And Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. So we'll have to see how it goes. Once again, it's not alarming to hear that Mason Graham has had some growing pains so far. What rookie hasn't had growing pains so far? So it'll be interesting to see what he looks like against all the veterans during minicamp next week. Again, it's just minicamp, and we're not going to be able to glean too much from it, but I think we'll still get a pretty good idea of how the lights are coming on for him. And then when you get into training camp and you see him up against a good offensive line, such as against the Eagles, that's going to be really good data. Same thing when he plays in the preseason game. So let's see how he comes along. Let's see when Mike Hall comes back. I don't even know if we know for sure when he's going to be back from his knee surgery. I'm guessing that they're hoping that he'll be ready, maybe not for the start of camp, but at some time during training camp. So you put those two guys together, and it could be dynamite if it works out the way that it's supposed to.
All right, another story that has sort of been overshadowed a little bit by the quarterback battle, and I think it's a really important one, is somebody that we saw yesterday and talked to, and someone that we have seen around the facility at times this offseason and are getting eyeballs on, very important, and that is Dawand Jones. So Dawand Jones, look, the runway's clear for him to be the left tackle, and he's one of those guys on the list of guys that I'm looking at this season, and I'm like, okay, you got to get an answer on this guy. Dawand Jones is right there. So, Ashley, we stood right there next to Dawand Jones. There are photos out there on Twitter of us standing next to Dawand Jones, and we look like tiny human beings next to him. But he is much sleeker looking, skinnier is not the right word, but he is in much better shape than he was this time a year ago, as he's coming back from a very different injury. He did have a knee scope this offseason. I had forgotten about that, but it was a broken bone, a broken fibula. Is that right? I've written it a million times. Broken fibula. So not as bad as the knee injury in his rookie year, but very important here because you've got a chance, if Dawand Jones can settle into that left tackle role, to basically make up for your Jedrick Wills miss in the best way possible. And then you don't have to chase this position next offseason. You can just have an answer. So when you looked at Dawand, Ashley, and you wrote about kind of what he said yesterday and talking about all that body fat that he lost, I guess how encouraging is it what we've seen from him so far?
I mean, it definitely is noticeable that he looks different. And Dan, the word that I used in my story is leaner. I think that's the best way to describe him. And he estimated that he's lost about 20 pounds of body fat. And we know the Browns have all kinds of tools and mechanisms to measure body composition. That stuff is tracked, very, very closely, especially for Dawand, who made it really a point of emphasis to change how he is built. So he actually weighs, like people have been estimating, he should be at this weight, he should be at that weight. His weight is almost identical to what it was last year. They have him listed as 374 right now. He was 375 last year. So basically he took 20 pounds of fat, according to what he said yesterday, and he's now leaned out, put it on his muscle. And a big impetus for that, number one, wanting to stay healthy. He said it's a big goal for him to finish this year playing all 17 regular season games, because he hasn't done that yet. Even though the fibula is a freak injury, this is a guy who we've seen have knee problems already. He's not been able to finish a season. And I think taking off weight is going to help him with that. And adding more of that muscle is going to help him with that. And number two, it was very intentional with how he views the position needs to be played. He talked a lot about some of the guys he studied, and really that left tackle, you need a lot more finesse. That was the word he kept using, finesse, over and over and over again. And of course, like the interesting quote in all of this was him telling us that he talked to Andrew Berry and wasn't too crazy initially, it sounds like, about the idea of moving over to the left side. And I'm like, wait a second, this seems like so contrary to everything you've told us before, Dawand. And he said really at this point it was about he's spent so much of his football career on the right side. He's right-handed. That's a big part of it. But, he said he's put in the work, even though it was something it sounds like he was maybe a little wary about when they came to him with this idea. He's put in the work to change his body. He's studied other guys. He's studied other guys who made the move from right tackle to left tackle in the respective seasons they did that. And he knows there's a big chance here for him. So I was encouraged by physically how he looks, and I hope the changeover for him mentally, that he's really bought in, and it sounds like he has. Everyone's saying he's doing all the things, he's buying into what they're asking him to do. But he obviously, we've known this, has a chance to lock up that spot if he performs well.
And it just kind of goes to, we've talked about this a little bit at quarterback. Like if one of these quarterbacks, if Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel or even Kenny Pickett, he's young enough to fit in this category, if they emerge as a potential, future guy, now all of a sudden those first round picks next year, you're maybe thinking about using them elsewhere. It opens up those possibilities, or you're not trading for a quarterback in the offseason, or you're not spending a bunch of money on a quarterback next offseason. I kind of view left tackle the same way, Mary Kay. If Dawand Jones shows you he's the guy for the foreseeable future, well, now you're not using a draft pick on a left tackle, or you don't have to go out and play the free agency game and spend a ton of money to bring in a left tackle. Now you have an answer finally at this position, and you did it probably in the best possible way with a 4th round pick kind of hitting on that lottery ticket. It just falls into that category of, it makes next offseason so much easier if Dawand Jones can just solve this problem for you. A problem of your own making because you missed on Jed Wills. But if you can make up for it by hitting on Dawand Jones, that just makes life so much easier for you.
That would be a huge save, an absolute huge save. It would almost be a Brock Purdy over Trey Lawrence save, right? Trey Lance save. Sorry about that. Yeah,
Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance. It's easy to get them.
I just melded them together. But yeah, it would be an absolute huge save if they could make that happen. So they'll have to see how it goes. And I did think it was kind of curious that that he said what he said, because when I talked to him in his rookie season, he talked about wanting to follow in the footsteps of Joe Thomas, and he thought that playing left tackle would be a breeze for him because he had played some of it at Ohio State. He didn't think the transition would be that great. And it just seems like his tone on that has changed a little bit, but he knows he's going to be doing it. So I think he just has to overcome whatever mentals he's got going with this whole thing, because I think he has the potential to be really good at it.
Yeah, it's funny. He said that, and I said this to you guys yesterday. Like, we would kill Jed Wills if he would have said that in a press conference. Like, we would absolutely he would be getting destroyed on sports talk radio. And look, some of that is, right, Jed, years of Jed, he kind of earned a little bit of that. Dawand hasn't quite gotten to that point yet. So I did think that was interesting, but I also will say, like, I guess one of the way he explained it actually made sense. Like, it's more of like, man, I know how to play right tackle, and now I've almost got to learn how to do things the other way.
I mean, I think it's worth reading the quote, when I did ask that follow-up, because I have my story pulled up here, and he said, it was something that you play your whole life. I think it's hard to adapt to something else. I have a big, strong right hand punch. I'm right-handed, so it's easier to punch to the right, but left side, I feel like it's more finesse. The game, it comes to you a little bit slower and sometimes faster at times. It just depends. At the same token, he also said, things he was looking forward to about playing on the left side. And again, he spent a lot of time over the last 2 years. He watched Tristan Wirfs, right, who primarily played right tackle at Iowa, made the switch when he got into the NFL, and obviously is one of the best left tackles in the NFL. And Dawand said he singled him out because they're similar sizes. Tristan Wirfs is 6'7", 347 compared to Dawand. So I also think that he said, who was the other one? He said, Dan, was it Trent Brown? Right?
Yeah, Trent Brown was the guy he's really been studying.
Trent Brown. Yeah, that was his big focus this offseason. because Trent Brown made that switch when he was with the Patriots in 2022. So it's like, I think it kind of came off a different way, like more positive, I should say, because he's like, oh yeah, like I had some trepidation about it. And, Dawand will kind of say what's on his mind. He's a bit more candid. And I think we always all appreciate that when players are candid. But you go through the thought process, okay, it's a change, but he's clearly put in a lot of work and spent a lot of time thinking about this. And I think that to me is almost just as impressive as his physical transformation.
I also think too, like Mary Kay, I was just thinking about this, like this offensive line is really facing a big offseason again next year. And look, we're talking about the offseason next year, or at least I am, before we even get this season even starts. But Joel Bitonio's year to year at this point. Wyatt Teller is up after this year. Jack Conklin, Ethan Posick, and Joel too, obviously. They're all up after this year. Maybe some extensions get done during the season, but they're all getting older. I don't know. I don't know what this offensive line is going to look like next year. Luke Whippler has barely played. He's I assume going to be the backup center. Zach Zinter struggled a little bit last year, but he deserves, a little more time to show what he can do if he gets that opportunity. They signed Tevin Jenkins. Maybe that's kind of let's get him in here, get him into our system, and then he becomes one of our guards of the future or something. But just again, Dawand Jones, if he can just lock that down, that's one less thing you have to worry about on that line that could look very different a year from now.
Yeah, and he probably should spend some time talking to Tristan Wirfs, because Tristan Wirfs began his NFL career as a right tackle before he switched over to left tackle. And I can't remember if it was 2 seasons ago, I think it may have been, where he switched over to left tackle. So he spent his college career at right tackle, and then a good portion of the first part of his NFL career as right tackle before he switched over to the left side. And I'm sure he had some trepidation as well, but he was really steeped on the right side before he had to make that switch. So it probably would behoove Dawand to spend some time talking to him, because it's gone really, really well for Tristan Wirfs. He's one of the best left tackles in the NFL, as he was one of the best right tackles in the NFL. So hopefully Dawand will have the same kind of success in that regard. I really feel like he's going to be able to do it. And fortunately for him, he does really look the part right now. He has to stay healthy, but they also went out and signed a very experienced swing tackle in Cornelius Lucas. So if it doesn't work out exactly as they hope, they do have some backup.
Okay, I'm just going to throw it open here. Anything we missed yesterday in the whole quarterback battle? Anything stand out to you from practice, or something somebody said or you heard? Anything say? If we want to talk quarterbacks, we can. I don't care. And anything else stand out to you that we missed from yesterday?
No, I think I would just like to reiterate or revisit the notion, and I wrote a whole column about it today, that I just want to continue to caution excuse me, fans on too much overhyping Shedeur Sanders right now, because he already has suffered one precipitous tumble from a presumptive first round pick in the draft all the way down to number 5. And maybe everyone who is evaluating this situation right now shouldn't set himself up for another fall. Let's let him develop the way that he needs to develop. Let's not christen him or grant him the surefire QB1 right now, like some people are doing, especially more on the national level, and then have it be some kind of a fail when it doesn't happen like that. It shouldn't go like that. I keep trying to bring everybody back to, okay, he's the 4th string quarterback. Yes, he can climb his way up the depth chart. Yes, here's what he has to do to be able to do that. But right now, he's not head and shoulders above everybody else in the competition. He's not far out front in front of everybody else in the competition. And I just think that we need to rein it in a little bit and keep it in perspective.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note too that, like, it's okay if he's not, even if he ends up being as good as some people think he can be. it's okay if he's not the week 1 starter. It's fine. That's not the end of his career. That's not the end of the Shedeur Sanders experience. It's fine if the Browns slow play this a little. And it's also important to remember that even we're not seeing everything. I mean, we're out there watching practices 2 days a week. Or twice here in the last 2 weeks, and then we get to watch 3 next week. But we're still not going to sit. We're not in the meeting rooms. We're not in walkthroughs. We're not in, anything else that's going on in that building, installs and film sessions and all of these things. So, like, we're not seeing that stuff. Even based on the limited stuff we're seeing, it's still kind of like, let's just pump the brakes a little bit. So if you're just making your QB1 declarations on a Twitter video, like, you're seeing even less than we are. So, whether we're talking about him nationally or just fans on Twitter or anything else, it's okay if this thing gets slow played a little bit. And it's like, look, if Shedeur ends up being the starter at some point and is a franchise quarterback, great. It doesn't matter if he starts week 1 or not. It's about kind of trusting the process here with Shedeur Sanders and, where this is going. If he ends up being a starter in this league eventually or not, there's a process in place, and we don't need to rush it. So I agree with Mary Kay, Ashley. That's the short way of saying what I just said.
Yeah, I mean, I think like 99% of the time, it's better for most rookie quarterbacks to slow play things. Like, if you don't have to absolutely throw somebody into the fire right away, like, why would you do that? And it's not a knock to do that either. Like, I think it's in most of the times the best interest of the player. And that's what you need to be concerned about when you are talking about the business of a franchise quarterback, or even just a quarterback that is going to be with you for a season. You don't want to wreck a guy by throwing him into something too early and before he's ready. And we talked about this a lot with Baker. We talked about it a lot with Deshaun Watson. With quarterbacks too, so much of the evaluation and playing the game as a team is making sure that you're not destroying the confidence of your guy. And whether that's playing somebody with an injury before they're ready, or letting them play through an injury, or starting them before they're ready to start, all those things. Part of Dorian Thompson-Robinson too, right? And how much that first Baltimore game, his rookie year, impacted him, and how he had to get past that. And I don't know that he ever did fully get past it, right? So I think that's a huge part of the position. Obviously, we all know that, but it's worth saying again, the mental part, the confidence part is a huge part of quarterback success.
And look, if we get to the season and he's the best quarterback, great, start him. But I think we're still at a point, I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday, Mary Kay, like, if the guy isn't even taking first team reps in practice, how can you say he's going to start week 1? It's like those two things don't go together. If he's your week 1 starter, he should be taking those first team reps, I would imagine. But I don't know. I mean, we're just trying to go off what we're seeing and what we're watching, and not all of it has to do with, okay, he completed this many passes, or, hey, that pass looked really great. I wish it were that simple, but we've got to go off what we're seeing and how these guys are being, spaced out and used, and the reps they're being given in practice. And so you can't sit here and say this guy will be the week 1 starter when we haven't even seen him take first team reps. Now, maybe he has when we haven't been out there. So I will throw that in there. But it's just too soon to make that leap.
What we haven't even seen is him in pads have to deal with an onrushing Myles Garrett for 1 snap. I mean, let's see that first before we declare who the winner of the competition is. And as I wrote in my column, which, a lot of times people just read the tweet these days and don't get into the story, but the story puts every single thing into context about what he's doing and how he's doing it and when he's doing it. And he's coming along well. He's studying film. He's coming up the learning curve. He has a major core issue to work on. And we've talked about this before, and that's drifting backwards and taking too many sacks and too many negative plays. That's his thing that he has got to address and fix. And if he can do that, then he will be closer to having an opportunity to get some more of those quality reps and to move his way up the depth chart. But that's the thing that he's got to work on right now. So it's just way too early for all the hype. And I don't think it's fair to him. I don't think it's fair to him. Like I said, he was already, through no fault of his own, perhaps overhyped in the pre-draft process. And now the same thing is happening again in the offseason. He's getting overhyped. It's not his fault. He's not doing anything to attract and draw all of this attention. He's really working hard, putting his head down and just trying to pick up this scheme as best he possibly can. And he should have the opportunity to do that without people setting him up again to maybe not meet the standard or to not meet where the bar is. He doesn't need that right now. He's a rookie quarterback. He's learning. He's doing a great job. Looks really nice in camp. And let's just keep letting it play out.
All right. Our friends on Twitter will love that segment. That'll do it for this edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. You can find us on Twitter, Orange Brown Talk. You can find us on Instagram, Orange and Brown Talk. Our YouTube is Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. And of course, if you're not a Football Insider subscriber, cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page to become a subscriber and of course, become one of our texters. You know what we didn't talk about real quick? I meant to bring this up real quick. This is like the post-credits scene. Aaron Rodgers is a Pittsburgh Steeler, so the Browns get to face Aaron Rodgers twice a week. I guess that's pretty big news, Mary Kay.
That is pretty big news. The way that I wrote it in my story that I posted today was that the Steelers have emerged from their own personal darkness retreat over Aaron Rodgers. So they finally have their answer. They have their quarterback. They have a 4-time NFL MVP, former Super Bowl MVP. And now they're going to be ready to roll. They've got DK Metcalf. They are overhauling their offense. And now they've got another future Hall of Famer. So the Browns will probably be facing him twice this year, I would imagine. And I also mentioned that if he faces Joe Flacco, the combined age of the two quarterbacks will be 81 in the first meeting and 82 in the second meeting, which is got to be close to a record, I would think. It's got to be up there pretty high. So yeah, Aaron Rodgers with the Steelers, be there or be square, October 12th.
Yeah, look, I don't know what Aaron Rodgers has left. This is not Green Bay MVP Aaron Rodgers, but you look at the numbers from last year, they were pretty good. I think he can still play. And the bottom line for Pittsburgh, Ashley, is he's not Mason Rudolph or Skylar Thompson. So this is an upgrade for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
It is, and I mean, I just think of Ben Roethlisberger's last year when we all know Big Ben could not throw that football about, I don't know, maybe more than 10 yards, and they still snuck into the playoffs with Mike Tomlin. I actually think those two guys have probably wanted to work together for so long. We know how they have talked about one another, at least how Aaron Rodgers has talked about Mike Tomlin quite a bit and praised him. So, yeah, I think that like Mike Tomlin will get the most out of Aaron Rodgers, even at the age Aaron Rodgers is currently at. And you can never sleep on the Steelers. But as we know, like the Steelers fans' ultimate frustration, they get in the playoffs and don't win or knocked out by the divisional round at the latest lately. But they'll finish with a winning record still. So they have that going for them.
All right, there we go. There's our post-credits scene here on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. I told you about all the socials, so I won't do it again. For Mary Kay and Ashley, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.